She was 27 when the truth finally caught up with her. Not in a police station, not in a shrine, but alone on the cold floor of her living room, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked above her. Her hands were shaking, her throat dry, and the only words she could form were whispered into the darkness. I used him. Outside, a generator coughed to life somewhere down the street, and the smell of petrol mixed with damp evening air. This wasn't a confession meant for forgiveness. It was the moment reality broke through denial. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 2 years earlier, life had felt different. She met Chima at a modest wedding reception in Owerri, where plastic chairs lined the compound and a DJ struggled with faulty speakers. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He laughed easily and spoke with care, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. They bonded over small things, shared plates of rice, jokes about transport fares, the quiet hope that things would somehow work out. Within months, they were inseparable. When they married, there was no grand hall, no convoy of cars, just family, prayers, and promises whispered with genuine belief. Reality arrived quickly. Chima worked nights as a security guard, returning home at dawn smelling of dust and strong coffee. She sold akara and pap near a busy junction, waking before sunrise to prepare. Money was always short. Rent notices came early. Food finished quickly. Yet Chima never complained. He always said, "We'll get there. Just give it time." At night, they lay on a thin mattress, listening to passing motorcycles and distant laughter, dreaming aloud about a better future. She smiled when he spoke, but inside, fear was growing. She worried about age, expectations, and the quiet pressure that comes when society keeps asking when life will finally improve. The turning point didn't come with drama. It came softly. One evening, as she counted coins on the table, a woman she barely knew mentioned someone who helps people when banks won't. The words sounded harmless, curious. Days later, she met the man. He spoke calmly, dressed simply, and never raised his voice. He talked about opportunities, about people who were tired of waiting. He never mentioned blood or violence. He spoke about sacrifice in vague terms, about letting go to move forward. She left unsettled, but also intrigued. When you're desperate, even unclear promises sound hopeful. She told Chima only part of it. She said the man knew people who could help with capital. Chima hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet him. The man visited their home once, then twice. He praised Chima's patience, his endurance. He said people like him deserved more than survival. Each visit made her more restless. Each night, guilt fought with desire. She began hiding things. Phone calls taken outside, meetings she claimed were business. Chima trusted her completely. That trust became the heaviest thing she carried. Weeks passed. Bills piled up. Her friends posted pictures online, new shops, new phones, new lives. Comparison crept in quietly. She returned to the man alone this time. He spoke differently now. Clearer. He said wealth never comes without loss. He said the sacrifice would not be immediate, but it would be exact. She didn't ask too many questions. She didn't want details. She wanted results. That night, walking home under flickering streetlights, she told herself she was doing this for them. For survival. For dignity. For a future that no longer felt patient enough to wait. At home, Chima noticed the distance. He asked gentle questions. She answered vaguely. One night, he reached for her hand and said, "No matter what, we're together." She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. The next morning, he left for work early. She watched him walk down the road, his uniform slightly oversized, his shoulders slumped from fatigue. Something inside her screamed to stop everything. But fear spoke louder. Fear of staying poor. Fear of wasting time. Fear of being left behind by a world that rewards speed, not endurance. The final meeting came quietly. She told Chima she was visiting a friend out of town. She packed lightly, her hands trembling as she zipped the bag. The place was far from the main road, surrounded by trees and silence. The man was there, along with others who avoided eye contact. There were no chants, no drama, just instructions delivered with cold certainty. She felt detached, like she was watching someone else make the choices. By the time it was over, dawn was breaking and birds were beginning to stir. She returned home numb, washed her hands repeatedly, and sat beside Chima as he slept, listening to his steady breathing. Nothing changed immediately. Days passed. No money came. No miracle followed. Instead, something else arrived. Chima fell ill. At first, it seemed like stress, then fever, then weakness. Clinics offered no answers. Medication barely helped. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand, replaying every moment she could have chosen differently. He smiled weakly and said, "We'll be fine." 2 weeks later, he was gone. Just like that. No explanation that made sense. Only silence where his voice used to be. At the burial, she stood still as people cried around her. She felt hollow. Later, alone in their house, she stared at his sandals by the door and realized the truth with terrifying clarity. There was no wealth, no reward, only loss. She had traded trust for a promise that never intended to keep her safe. And now, she would live with it. As you listen to this, ask yourself, when pressure closes in, what do you hold on to? And what are you willing to risk to escape hardship? The house felt different after Chima's burial. Not empty, just unfamiliar. Like a place that had forgotten how to breathe. His clothes still hung behind the door, neatly arranged the way he liked them. His slippers remained by the corner, untouched. Each morning, she woke up expecting to hear the sound of water running from the bathroom, or his quiet cough before heading out. Instead, there was silence. The kind that presses against your ears until your thoughts become too loud to escape. She moved slowly through the rooms, afraid that if she rushed, she might remember too much at once. For weeks, neighbors came with food and condolences. They spoke softly, using careful words. "It is well. God knows best." Some stayed longer than necessary, studying her face, searching for cracks. Others avoided eye contact completely. In Nigeria, grief is communal, but suspicion walks beside it. She noticed the pauses in conversation when she entered a room, the sudden lowering of voices. She felt exposed, as if her guilt had become something people could smell in the air. At night, she lay awake, replaying the last weeks of Chima's life, wondering which moment had sealed his fate. 3 months later, survival demanded action. Rent was due, food was running out. She returned to selling akara, setting up her small stand near the junction where buses slowed down. The smell of hot oil filled the air, familiar and comforting. But customers were fewer. Some people crossed the road to avoid her. Others bought quietly and left without conversation. One afternoon, a woman she had known for years looked at her and said, almost kindly, "My sister, life is not a race." The words hit harder than any insult. She nodded, pretending not to understand the meaning behind them. At night, memories refused to rest. She remembered how Chima used to joke about her akara being the best on the street. How he would steal pieces before customers arrived. how he believed in effort, even when results were slow. Those memories became punishment. She began avoiding sleep, afraid of dreams where he looked at her the way he used to, trusting, gentle, unaware. When she did sleep, she woke up gasping, her heart racing, convinced she had heard his voice calling her name. 6 months after his death, she returned to her parents' village. Her mother hugged her tightly, holding on longer than usual, as if trying to protect her from something unseen. Her father was quieter. He asked simple questions, how she was coping, whether she was eating, but never mentioned Chima. At night, she overheard whispers from relatives. They spoke in half sentences and caution, the kind of talk that never reaches you directly, but still finds its way into your bones. She realized then that grief doesn't end with burial, it just changes shape. A year passed. Life continued in fragments. She helped her mother at the farm. She fetched water. She attended church. On the surface, she was healing. Inside, the weight remained. Then, one afternoon, while listening to the radio, she heard something that froze her in place. A news report spoke about arrests linked to fraudulent spiritual practices and ritual exploitation across several states. Survivors were mentioned, families destroyed, promises of fast wealth that ended in loss. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling, recognizing her own story hidden between the lines. That night, for the first time since Chima's burial, she cried without restraint. Not out of fear, not out of shock, but out of understanding. She realized she had never been special. She had not discovered a secret path to success. She had been targeted, like many others, at a moment of weakness. The realization didn't remove her guilt, but it gave it context. She whispered Chima's name into the darkness and said, "I see it now." It wasn't forgiveness she was seeking. It was acceptance. Over the next years, she changed quietly. She stopped chasing distractions. She began helping women in her village learn small trades. Nothing grand, nothing promising quick results. Just steady work, soap making, food processing, simple skills that grew slowly, honestly. When women complained about how long progress took, she listened patiently. Sometimes she told parts of her story, never the full details, just enough to warn. She noticed how desperation made people impatient, how easily hope could turn into risk when pressure mounted. People often asked why she never remarried. She always gave the same answer: "I'm still learning." The truth was deeper. She didn't trust herself with another person's heart. Not after what she had done with the first one she was given. Some nights, she sat outside, listening to crickets and distant generators, thinking about how love had once been her shelter, and how she had treated it like a tool instead of a gift. As you listen to this part of the story, ask yourself something difficult. When life refuses to move forward, do you wait? Or do you look for ways around the rules? And if the opportunity came with conditions you didn't fully understand, would you ask questions? Or would you choose silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 5 years passed, and the village slowly changed its rhythm around her. New shops opened. Old trees were cut down. Children who once followed her with curious eyes now barely noticed her presence. Time moved forward whether she was ready or not, but inside her, the past still lived clearly. Every morning, she woke before sunrise, listening to the distant sound of roosters and early footsteps on the road, reminding herself that another day had come, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. She no longer asked why things happened. She focused on what she would do with what remained. She lived simply. Her room held little more than a bed, a small table and a wooden box where she kept old documents and photographs. One picture showed her and Chima on their wedding day, standing under a faded canopy, smiling with shy confidence. She rarely looked at it, but she never threw it away. Some memories are too painful to revisit, yet too important to erase. At night, when the village generator went quiet and the air grew still, she often found herself speaking to him in her thoughts, updating him on small things, harvests, visitors, lessons learned, as though he could still hear. One afternoon during the rainy season, someone knocked on her door. The rain was heavy, pounding against the zinc roof, turning the ground outside into soft mud. The visitor was a young woman named Zainab, soaked, nervous, and breathing fast. Zainab spoke quickly, afraid she might change her mind. She said her husband had been sick for months. She said hospital bills were piling up. She said someone had promised her help, real help. But the conditions scared her. As she spoke, her hands shook the same way hers once had. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. She listened without interrupting. When Zainab finished, silence filled the space between them. The rain softened, dripping steadily from the roof edges. Finally, she spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She said, "I once believed that suffering meant I deserved a shortcut. I was wrong." Zainab looked confused, then afraid. Slowly, carefully, she told her the truth. Not every detail, not every moment, but enough. Enough to make Zainab understand that desperation doesn't negotiate. That once you cross certain lines, there is no promise waiting on the other side. Zainab cried quietly, not from fear, but from relief. She stayed for hours. When she left, she hugged her tightly and said, "Thank you for saving my home." That night, she couldn't sleep. But for the first time in years, the heaviness in her chest felt lighter. It wasn't joy. It was purpose. She realized then that while she could never undo what she had done, she could stop the story from repeating itself through someone else. From that day on, people began to come. Not many at first. Just women with tired eyes and worried voices. She never claimed authority. She never presented herself as a teacher. She simply shared truth, calmly, without exaggeration. She told them that poverty is painful, but regret is heavier. That anything asking you to trade love, trust, or human life for relief is not a solution. Some listened, some didn't. She accepted both. She had once ignored warnings, too. Years later, she was invited to sit quietly at the back of a small youth program in a neighboring town. The hall was modest. Plastic chairs, a borrowed microphone. The speaker talked about patience, consistency, and dignity in work. As she watched the young faces listening, some restless, some attentive, her thoughts drifted to Chima. She remembered how he believed in slow progress, how he believed effort mattered, even when nobody was watching. She realized that his values had outlived him, and she had spent years learning what he already knew. She never became wealthy. There were no breakthroughs that erased her past, but she found something else: stability of mind. When people asked why she never remarried, she smiled gently and said, "Some lessons are meant to stay with you." The truth was simpler. She chose to protect what was left of her conscience. She chose to live carefully, to speak honestly, to never again confuse desperation with entitlement. Now, as night falls and the village settles into silence, she still sits outside sometimes, listening to insects and distant radios playing softly in other homes. She thinks about how close she came to losing everything, and how she did lose the most important thing already. But she also thinks about Zainab, about the women who walked away from dangerous promises because someone finally told them the truth. She knows she will carry her regret forever, but she also knows it no longer owns her. As you reflect on this story, ask yourself honestly, when life puts pressure on you, what part of yourself are you willing to protect at all costs? Would you choose patience, even when it hurts? Or would you gamble everything on a promise that asks you to look away from your values? Let us know how this story made you feel in the comments. Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your lessons. Before we go, let us know where you're watching from. We truly want to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Some stories don't end with happiness. They end with truth. And sometimes truth is enough.